People choose to work with you because of who you are. What you do comes secondary. Let that sink in for a minute. Whether you're a physician, healthcare leader, researcher, entrepreneur, or a medical student or a graduate student, your personal brand influences opportunities long before you ever submit your resume or even walk into an interview. In this month's episode of Mid-Month Meeting of the Minds, I sit down with Sheikh Ali, founder and CEO of SC Medical Media, to discuss why every healthcare professional should be intentional about building a personal brand on LinkedIn. Why should a doctor have a personal brand? Hello, everyone. In today's mid-month meeting of the minds, we have Sheikh Ali. He is a former medical student turned entrepreneur who is an executive coach for physicians who aspire to the C-suite. And I'm going to let him tell you all about what he does and why should a doctor have a personal brand.
Thank you so much, Swati, for having me. I greatly appreciate it, and it's an honor to be here. So I basically work with clinician and healthcare executives who are trying to build out their presence on LinkedIn from start to finish. The goal is threefold. Number one is to build their authority. Number two is to gain valuable business-to-business connections. And number three, if they are interested, is to obtain speaking engagements or podcast guest segment features. In fact, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for LinkedIn. And so building your brand on LinkedIn as a clinician who's aspiring to the C-suite or any sort of healthcare executive is essential in 2026 and in the world that we live in now. And so I'm very excited to speak with you and the audience about personal branding, what it consists of, why it's so important, and how physicians can really use it to their executive advantage.
So, Sheikh, how did you determine that this is so important? Because I agree with you, personal branding is important, but even sometimes I'm confused as to like how I'm building up my own brand. So, how did you decide that this is important and what does it mean to you?
When I started my journey in entrepreneurship, let's kind of go back for a moment. So
Okay.
when I was 7 years old, I actually wanted to be a surgeon and a private practice surgeon at that. So I had a very specific goal in mind. And I basically carried that goal for 20 years until I was between third and fourth year of medical school. So between M3 and M4 year. When that happened, COVID took place. And obviously that changed the entire landscape of medicine. And what we saw was that a lot of private equity and big hospital groups were buying out the private practices. And so for me, as a young and upcoming physician to be, I saw that that wasn't really a viable model anymore. So that's when I decided to pivot to entrepreneurship. Now, when I was pivoting to entrepreneurship, around the same time, social media started to become more prominent because a lot of physicians were starting to promote themselves on the different social media platforms. So we're talking Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and even TikTok. And so
Correct.
when I started my business in January of 2023, I decided to focus on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at the time. And because I came from that medical world and because I knew that healthcare professional world the best, I decided, okay, that was going to be my niche. However, 1 year later, January of 2024, that's when I decided to pivot to LinkedIn specifically because of two reasons. Number one, because LinkedIn is the largest business to business platform in social media on the internet. And number two, also, I like the crowd of LinkedIn because the demographic of LinkedIn, they tend to be older, wealthier, and more importantly, they tend to be more established in their careers, whether it's as a clinician or as a healthcare executive. And so that journey in of itself and building my brand on LinkedIn, and we'll talk in a moment about what a personal brand actually means because it's a word that's thrown around a lot. But building that brand on LinkedIn myself and seeing how I was doing it, then I decided at that point, okay, now it's time for me to actually start working with healthcare executives and clinician executives to help build out their LinkedIn presence as well.
So let me pause for a second. I want to remind our listeners that LinkedIn is the only platform dedicated to improving the world's productivity. It wants all businesses to be more successful. It was designed in 2002, and at some point, I can't remember the year anymore, taken over by Microsoft, but It was designed for people who want to be more productive in
Mhm.
their business life. So it is not the same as Instagram, which is for sharing pictures, or Facebook, which is for connecting family and keeping in touch with people, or say Reddit or Substack, where you can write articles. LinkedIn is your professional page. So I just want everybody to keep that in the back of their mind while you keep going. So tell us a little bit more. How did you built your brand
Mhm.
on LinkedIn, and then you realized you're going to be able to coach clinicians and other healthcare executives to build their brand to move up into the C-suite. So tell us about that.
Yes. So first of all, we have to define what a personal brand is, because I think that's
Yes.
really, really important because there's a lot of hoopla and things that are thrown out there about what personal branding is. So for me, and I've always said this to myself and my clients, the core definition of a personal brand is what people are saying about you when you are not in the room. I repeat, when you are not in the room. And so if you are that clinician who is aspiring to the C-suite, or if you're a healthcare executive looking to a higher leadership role, being able to be in those rooms where people are talking about you, but you may not necessarily be there is very, very critical. Now, there are three components to a personal brand. Number one is your core values. And I don't think that this is actually spoken about enough because your core values, Swati, serve as the filter through which every micro and macro decision that you make it's done through your core values. And so having those core values and making sure that your online presence reflects those core values is essential. That's number one. Number two is what I call applicable expertise. So just because you might be a clinician who has all these wonderful board certifications and so on, and that's great and that's important for your clinical practice, doesn't necessarily mean that that translates to your target audience on LinkedIn. And so being able to thread that needle between what your expertise is and being able to showcase it in a way at a fifth grade level so that everybody on LinkedIn can understand what you do and what you stand for is essential. And then number three is your personality, because you have to put the personal in personal brand. So I always recommend picking one or two little quirks about yourself. So for me, for example, I call myself the James Bond of LinkedIn because I'm a big James Bond fan. And also, I'm a big fountain pen fan. And so that branding has really helped me grow my business. And I actually had a meeting very recently, about a month ago, with an orthopedic trauma surgeon. And she told me, she said, I walked by the Mont Blanc store and I thought about you. And I was like, bingo. That's why we do the personal branding, and that's why personal branding is so important. So I recommend one or two quirks. So I think for you, Swati, I believe it's food and travel, if I'm not mistaken. I think that those are two things that you're very, very passionate about, and sometimes
Yes.
you do share on LinkedIn. So,
Food
yep,
and travel, and I am the professional connector, whether
there
it
you
is
go.
in food, travel, or your professional life in healthcare
Hmm.
and life sciences. Yeah, no, I was having a dinner with a girlfriend over the weekend, and we knew each other from public health school. We've known each other almost 20 years.
Hmm.
And she said she went to the industrial hygienist meeting that was in New Orleans about a week
Hmm.
ago, and she said she put on her Swati connector hat. And I thought to myself, I've hardly even talked about my business with her, but she knows I'm a connector. So, yeah,
Exactly. And if
food,
you think
travel, and
about
connections. Yes.
And if you think about it carefully, our mind, we have so much going on in our day-to-day lives, Swati, that there's only one to three things that you can really think of when you think of a particular person. So why not put yourself out there, and why not create the messaging for yourself or work with somebody like either you or myself to help refine your messaging so that you can really put your best foot forward. So whether you are looking to ascend in leadership, or even if you're already in a C-suite level position and you're looking to network with people across different healthcare systems, I think that's also where LinkedIn can be very valuable. Or if you are an executive leader and you are trying to recruit new talent to join your executive team, that's also another benefit of really building out your brand on LinkedIn. Because at the end of the day, Swati, people choose to work with you because of who you are. What you do comes secondary. And I think that your story that you shared about what you were saying with your girlfriend is a perfect testament to that philosophy.
Thank you. Yes, you brought up some very key points, and something we talked about before we started the podcast today. Everyone needs to remember you need to network and be active on LinkedIn before you want to change jobs. So
Hmm.
having that personal brand established is just saying, look, this is who I am. And it's not saying you're looking for a job. It's not saying you're trying to change a job, but you're just showcasing your best self, you to your best ability.
Yes, and networking to go on that point. Networking is a continuous and a lifelong skill. It doesn't matter. So in the case of a clinician's trajectory, like I'm thinking about a clinician's trajectory, whether you are a medical student and even before when you're a pre-med student and you're interested in medical school or you're interested in becoming a physician, or whether you're at the tail end of your career, there is a branding and a messaging that is meant for whether you are a junior level physician now starting, whether you're mid-level or whether you are more advanced in your career. And your branding and your messaging might change over time, which is normal because your brand should follow your career trajectory. But that's a really important point, Swati, and I'm glad that you mentioned
Yeah, you said some other things. I wish I could retain them all because it was like
it.
so much and it was so important, but we'll come back to that. So tell us a little bit about what's your ideal client or what do you elaborate more on what you're doing? Do you have
Mhm.
a name for your company? I forgot. I know you do. So let's go with that.
Yes. Yes. So I'm the founder and CEO of SC Medical Media. And my ideal client audience are people who are clinician executives. So let me explain what this means because some people don't know what that means. So a clinician executive is any clinician. So they could be a nurse, they could be a PA, they could be a physician who are seeing patients. And they're also an executive. So they could be a chief medical officer. Maybe they're aspiring for another C-suite position. Maybe they want to be a CEO of a major corporation. Or alternatively, they're also clinicians, but they might be running their own consultancy practice. So I have many clients like that who are starting their own consultant business, and they might want to network with a specific group. So, for example, I have a few physician expert witness clients. So those are physicians who are looking to work with medical malpractice and personal injury attorneys. So their branding and their messaging is going to be different to somebody who is aspiring to a hospital or a C-level position. I also work with healthcare executives. So people who are in medical device, pharmaceutical device, or oncology device who are at this VP level or higher, and they want to build their brand and they want to showcase their senior executive experience on LinkedIn. As you said, before there's a job search or before they get fired or before they get let go or whatever, that is also where I would be able to help. Now, my services consist, there are four pillars to a LinkedIn visibility and to your LinkedIn presence. Number one, four P's, I call them. Number one is position. Number two is polish. Number three is publish. And number four is pursue. And so those are all the layers of LinkedIn visibility. And that's basically what I work with my clients. So it's coming up with a brand strategy, creating a profile that speaks to their audience. So that's the polish part. Creating content that is in a done with you fashion rather than done for you, because I think it's important for the clinician or the healthcare executive to have their voice heard on LinkedIn. So that's the publish. And then the pursue is actually doing targeted and intentional outreach to open up those opportunities because opportunities are not given, they are created.
This is true. I've always said serendipity is all about what you do with that opportunity.
That's right.
It doesn't just happen, but it's what you do with it. So, wow. I love how you break it down. Tell us a little bit more about how many years have you been providing this SC medical
Yeah,
media consulting?
so I've had the business for 3 to 4 years now, but I've been doing LinkedIn specifically for 2 to 3 years, I would say, two going on 3 years. And again, it goes back to what you said at the top of the podcast. LinkedIn is a very different animal compared to Instagram and compared to Facebook and compared to TikTok. So if you're a physician or a healthcare executive and you might have a robust presence on those platforms, your strategies for those platforms are not going to apply to LinkedIn because LinkedIn works completely differently. And so that's really where somebody who's more specific, like in what I do, or even in what you do as well, Swati, is very, very key and very important. And that also goes to the power of networking, which we can also talk about the power of networking, because I have people in my close network who do LinkedIn services, LinkedIn consulting services like what I do, but outside of healthcare. So that way, when I have somebody that comes to me that is not in healthcare and they say, I saw you on Swati's podcast, for example, and I like what you had to say, but at the same time, they're not in healthcare, then I refer them to that person. If somebody needs help with their resumes, I have somebody that I can refer to for that. So having that robust network is absolutely critical to succeed as a professional and even in your personal life too.
That is excellent. I'm trying to retain what it was I wanted to ask you back. Because obviously for our listeners, this is not pre-recorded. And oh, Sheikh, I wanted us to give some tangible strategies.
Yeah.
So, what are let's do some one or two top tips that people can take away from this, and so they have something to digest and think about.
Yeah, so three things. Number one, stop putting in your headline your job title and start putting what you do for others. So the format that you should think of is I help X do Y in Z setting. So when you do that, you're putting your audience first rather than saying, board certified physician in X specialty or anything like that. That doesn't tell me what you're doing. And so the headline, just so everyone's on the same page, that is the piece of text that appears beneath your name, and it appears when you post and when you are commenting on other people's posts. So that's number one. That's the first action tip. Number two, the banner photo that is the long photo that is behind your profile photo there. That is prime real estate. So what I would put there is I would put 2 to 3 bullet points about what value you're providing or what services you're providing if you're a service-based provider in that case, or if you're a consultant and you have your own practice, put it up there so that people can see it as soon as they see your profile. And then number three, your About Me section, which is a section that is below that describes what you do. It should not only describe what you do and what your qualifications are and why you're qualified to do what you do, but give a little bit of that personal flavor, like what we were talking about. I know we love food, so that personal flavor, just like what we were talking about before. Name one or two things because I cannot tell you, Swati, there will be people that will watch this podcast and they will say to me nothing about LinkedIn, and they'll say, Sheikh, I love that you love James Bond movies. And that's it. That will be their feedback. Or they'll come to you and they say, Swati, I didn't know that you enjoyed food and travel so much. So you never know. Sometimes the smaller conversations are what lead to the bigger conversations. And so that's why making sure that you have that brand, as we were talking about, is essential to succeed in the 21st century.
So it's interesting, your three tangible points. I tell people in the about section, this was something I learned from someone who inspires me.
Hmm.
I tell people that you need to list your accomplishments in a quick like succession of statements like I have coached over 300 people, or I have made over 500 connections. So there's something tangible for the person looking at you to be like, oh, they're actually doing something. They're making a difference, or they're doing something meaningful. And then
Hmm.
for the uh, headline, I've also heard this is slightly different from what you say is you don't say a sentence like I do this, but you definitely should outline what services you provide, which is what you said.
Hmm.
I found personally when I had professional networker, I was getting ads to be a recruiter or it
Yeah.
wasn't targeting the right audience. So I had to put back in the words OBGYN so
Hmm.
people would know that I am a physician first. And
Hmm.
while I don't practice anymore, I'm still licensed and board certified. But either way, I practice, I did all that stuff. And that's the part of the background of my networking process.
Hmm.
And so I found I needed to put that back in there, but then I put in other relevant references to what services I do. So
Okay,
it's
so
interesting.
yeah, I have a few points about that. First of all, yes, I think that mentioning your tangibles in the About Me section is important, but I don't think that you should lead necessarily the About Me section. What the leading statement should be more about what is the actual service that you're providing. Because when someone looks at your profile, the question that they're asking is, what's in it for me? And so making sure that the headline, the banner photo, and the About Me section address that. Then as the About Me section continues, then you can definitely list what what tangible quantitative things that you have achieved, like what you were mentioning. Regarding the headline, the reason why your headline did not work is because it was not specific enough. Because specificity is key. And I think that with the trends, how LinkedIn is starting to prioritize even more relevance over recency, I think that that's really, really important because LinkedIn is starting to prioritize more people who are really in depth about one particular thing. So my recommendation always is you have to say one thing 1,000 different ways, but it's the same message. So as long as you have a core main idea. So in your case, it would be professional physician networker, for example, or professional physician networker or professional connector who connects people in the medical field or something that mentions medical
Yeah,
or
no.
OBGYN or physician. Because when you do that, the headline is not only good for SEO purposes on the Google search, but also LinkedIn is going to start matching you to people like that. So for me, for example, One of the things that I started doing this year is speaking nationally. And I just came back from a national conference last week as of recording this podcast. And so I put speaker in my headline, and it's now starting to connect me with fellow speakers. And I actually formed a little community. There's about 3 or 4 of us, and we exchange ideas, and it's been very collaborative. And this is why I love LinkedIn so much. And I could talk about it all afternoon.
No, I love your points, and you're right. We need to hone in on our niche. And
Hmm.
sometimes when people are in the early stages of building their brand, they're still trying to figure out who they are. So
Yep.
sometimes I always tell people you need to take the downtime to think about who you are and reflect.
Hmm.
Usually when we're younger in our career, we're just like go, 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 working 24/7, 365, and you don't give yourself any time to process and think who you are.
Hmm.
And I think now today our world is in a mindset where we're stopping to pause and think about our work and life balance. And that gives us some time to think about, well, who am I? And
Hmm.
what gives me meaning? What can I do? And where do I want to go? And that is all part of building your brand.
And that's why the first thing I mentioned about your brand is your core values. Because in order to be number one is always going to be your core values. Because in order to decide what those core values are, it requires that self-reflection and that honesty that you have so ably described. Yeah.
Wow. So, as usual, I learned something from my podcast guests. Thank you, Sheikh. For everyone who's been listening, thank you for listening in to Mid-Month Meeting of the Minds, hosted by Plans Connect. That's my business. I'm Swati Shah, and thank you, Sheikh Ali.
Thank
And
you very much, and looking forward to connecting with everyone on LinkedIn.
yes, please follow us. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.